pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for January 8th, 2018. A big weekend of FA Cup, and we'll talk about this later on in the show. But we wanted to start the week today by talking about a news that came out this weekend. It's not official right now, but it makes a lot of sense. Indy 11 probably moving to USL. And to talk about this, we have Dr. Nipun Chopra on the line. Nipun, how you doing today?
Absolute pleasure joining you guys, Kevin and Duane. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. I guess really the place to start is just this news that the 11 are going to move from the NASL to USL. Obviously is going to cause some concern from some of the Indy 11 fans out there. So let's just start by talking to them directly. What will this news mean to them? What will it mean to the 11? Does it mean anything? Does it mean good things? Does it mean bad things? What does this mean to Indy 11 fans?
Yeah, it's actually a really great question. I think to the 11 fans, this means something that will divide fans. Towards the end of last year, a major number of folks within the Brickyard Battalion, which is the loudest supporter group and the biggest supporter group supporting Indy 11, brought out signs asking the team to switch to USL. So there was an interest within the fans that USL was a better option. But that is not a unanimous opinion. Of course, as you might imagine, there's always a heterogeneity of opinions in a large supporter group, and I think that's so for fans. It means something that they bring their own biases into. So some are for it, some are against it. I think objectively for the club, it means something that is that provides more stability than the NSL. It provides more of a chance to have local rivalries, such as FC Cincinnati, such as St. Louis FC, such as Louisville City FC, who won the USL last year, Nashville, Memphis, which will be announced today. All these clubs are within driving distance, which is something that will benefit, I believe, to the fans.
Fair enough. And I guess my question is this, is that there's this perception out there amongst certain NASL fans that the USL is lower, that it's a lower level of soccer. I know certainly talking to Ottawa Fury fans, who I know quite well, that perception exists. In your mind, this is more of an opinion question than a fact question, but in your mind, is NASL a higher level than USL still?
I think the best team in Division 2 last year was an NASL team. That was Miami FC. I think on any given day, I know FC Cincinnati beat them in the US Open Cup, and their fans will disagree, but in general, I would wager that Miami FC was the best team in Division 2. But I think after that, there was a significant gap, and some of the spots would be filled by USL teams. I think Louisville City was the second best team in the league. So I think if you look at the extremes, yes, I would say maybe there's a slight weightage towards NASL playing better football, mostly because they can pay their players better and therefore attract better players. But I think as a general rule of thumb, there is parity between, this past year, there was parity between the two Division 2 leagues.
Now, what I'm wondering, Nipun, is with the possibility of that move of Indy 11 to USL, you mentioned the word stability. And one thing that's important, and we don't always talk about this aspect, is the business aspect of a lower division team with local sponsorship. Not national ones, more locally focused businesses, mom and pop store, but even bigger dealership, car dealership and places like this. With USL's stability over the next 2 years, and now even the possibility of maybe the Indy 11 playing in Lucas Oil Field, which is the stadium of the Indianapolis Colts in the National Football League. Are those positive signs for the future, maybe, for the club itself, when you're looking at potential deals for sponsorship and maybe even bigger seating capacity?
Yeah, great question. I think, I have to clarify that the Lucas Oil bid is not a done deal at this point. That's the bit of this that is not a done deal. They're still negotiating that. Indy will end up in the USL, but I'm not convinced, and that's why I left it the way it is in the article, that they'll be at Lucas Oil. If it does happen to be that we end up at Lucas Oil, I think that's great for the ownership to attract more sponsors, as you mentioned. One thing that will change, and in any local Indy folks or anyone listening who's been to Indianapolis will know this, Lucas Oil is 2 blocks from the main fun part of downtown, with all the restaurants, with some of the bars, things like that. Whereas Mike and Carroll Stadium, which is where we currently play, is about a mile walk from the main part of downtown Indianapolis. So I think in terms of attracting sponsors, in terms of attracting fans to this amazing stadium, I think Lucas Oil would be a huge benefit. And to answer your question directly, I think joining USL would allow Indy 11 to negotiate cool sponsorships. To Indy 11's credit, even though NASL almost died last year, they managed to negotiate a 3-year deal with Turkish Airlines, which is absurd because Turkish Airlines doesn't even fly to Indianapolis. So there's obviously some good business people here. With the addition of a stable league, with the addition of a league that has local rivalries and will lead to an increase, I believe, in attendance, I think it does attract more sponsors.
Now, you mentioned the Mike Carroll Stadium. What is the capacity of the stadium right now for our listeners to understand? Because in USL in 2018, USL was clear. It did not ask the USSF for any waiver in the rules of Division 2, which means stadium needs to be 5,000 and over. Is it compliant with those rules as we speak, the Mike and Carroll Stadium?
Yes, it is. It's 10,000 capacity, a little bit more, 10,000 and change. So the issue wasn't meeting USSF compliance. That wasn't an issue for us. In fact, no stadium in the NASL had an issue with stadium compliance. The only stadiums that had issues with compliance in D2 were actually USL stadiums. So that was not an issue. But the problem with the Mike Carroll Stadium was it's a very old stadium. It's actually a track. It was meant for track and field. So the way the grandstand is set up, it's very clearly geared towards the finish line. So it's not, it's not weighted correctly. Almost all the attendance is in the main stand. So they had to bring in basically bleachers to provide the east part of it where I sit and the brickyard across from it behind the 2 goals. And then they had to bring in like a modular style to provide suites as well for the rich folks. So it was just, and by the way, there are no locker rooms. And I don't mean this as an exaggeration. There are no locker rooms in the Mike and Carroll Stadium. So that is an embarrassment, I believe, for professional athletes to not have a locker room to change in. So things like that make the Mike and Carroll Stadium an untenable situation. It was great for us to start in. We've been there since day one, but I think the next phase of Indy 11, if there is a next phase going forward, I think this is a step in the right direction.
I asked you earlier what this means for the 11 fans. I'm going to ask you a different question, same question, but a little bit different. What does this mean for the NASL?
Unclear. This morning, so let me answer this way. At this point, there's Miami FC, there's New York Cosmos, there's Jacksonville Armada, but they're going to make an announcement today, and it's not my story to share, but it's going to mean further complications for NASL. It involves 1904 FC, the San Diego team last night announced that they're going to play in 2019, and California United FC. So really there are 4 teams in the league right now. And then there are the additional 6 letters of intent by current NPSL teams, which include Boca Raton FC, Virginia Beach City FC, Detroit City FC, etc. Hartford City FC, etc. So it's the possibility of having as many as 10 teams next year, but really the league is in trouble. There's no doubt about that. And that's not even taking into consideration that there's a litigation, that all of it is contingent on getting this appeal that we're waiting for any day, the decision of waiting for any day. And so to get ahead of it, then the NASL announced today that they're going to, and you guys probably saw this, they're going to switch to the European calendar, which means they'll play from August to May. I have mixed feelings about that. I think it's in some ways a step in the right direction, but it complicates, and it's great for teams in Miami, great for teams in Florida, great for teams in California. But for teams in New York, for teams, if an Indy 11 supporter, if you told me to go watch the team play, yesterday it was -5 degrees Fahrenheit in Indianapolis. So it would not be an easy transition to the European calendar. So the NASL is kind of trying to find novel solutions, and I applaud them for that. But losing a team like Indy 11 complicates things a lot for the league, I think.
If they're going to go to the European calendar, it's a good thing that FC Edmonton left then, because
right.
Yeah, we'd see a lot of orange ball soccer if that would be the case.
Yes,
well,
definitely.
Yeah. Players
and no fan.
Literally die in the stands. But at any rate,
yeah, exactly. Death is not good. Death is never good.
All right. Let me ask you this. I know that a lot of NASL fans that might be listening to this are very dedicated in their belief that there needs to be an alternative vision out there from MLS. So I'd like you to articulate to me, if you can, whether we need an alternative vision from MLS within the American soccer pyramid.
I have to admit, it's never been asked to me in that particular way, so it kind of threw me off my usual game a little bit. I will say this: I think it's always great to have alternate models. I think it gives a place to folks that don't have a place. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is it's pretty clear, based on everyone I've talked to and based on people who are way better connected than I have talked to, that New York Cosmos and Miami FC don't have a place in the USL. It's also clear that California United FC, because of Orange County already being in there, don't have a place in the USL. So for those owners, Jacksonville Armada doesn't want to switch to the USL. I reported that the other day. So 3 of those owners in Jacksonville, Miami FC, and New York Cosmos have 3 owners who are committed to the beautiful game for the long term, are clearly trying to do something different. And for them to not have a home, I think, is a failure, in my opinion. Now, can we make the argument that it's in their best interest to force a change to USL, force a change to the pyramid as designed by MLS? You can make that argument. But I think in the absence of promotion relegation, where clubs can't just step up and do what they want based in the transfer market, Rocco Camiso can't buy an NPSL team and bring it to MLS. So in the absence of something like that, there has to be an alternate for these owners, in my opinion.
Nipun, I would be remiss not to ask you this question. I know you're a neuroscientist at the Indiana University School of Medicine, and your postdoctorate in traumatic brain injury and connection with Alzheimer's disease. And one aspect of soccer that always fascinates me, we talk about American football and hockey and concussion and a lot of effect to the brain and how it helps or how it creates an environment in the brain for disease to come later on in life. Talk about CTE or Alzheimer's or other kinds of diseases. But in the world of soccer, there's a lot of talk now with sub-concussion blows that would be equivalent to headers all the time, heading the ball, especially in the development of children in the age of between 8 to 16 when the pathways in the brain are created. And I'm wondering your views on how our kids should maybe not do so many headers and how that part of the game maybe needs to be rethinked.
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for asking that, because this is really my favorite thing to talk about. The thing with subconcussive injuries and soccer is this is a one-line summary. We need more research. That's the one-line summary of that, because it is unclear based on the current research if headers are leading to subconcussive injuries. I think it is likely, but I cannot say objectively as a scientist that is the case, even though I believe that is the case. So that has to be said. With kids, it's a very important consideration, because as you pointed out, brain development is happening in these kids, and especially in the teenage years and in early childhood development. One of the brain regions that develops at that time is the forebrain. It's the part of the brain right behind your temple. And that's the part of the brain involved in impulse control and motor planning and all the very high-level functions that we take for granted but are very important. and that is the part of the brain that would experience the subconcussive impacts of a header. So in premise, you can say that yes, it's correct to limit heading for kids, but you have to consider the other side, and this is where my soccer bias comes in, taking away my neuroscience bias. My soccer bias reminds me that kids are learning not only how to head the ball, but how to position their neck correctly during a header, they learn proprioceptive things, heading the ball in the air. If you're taking that away from kids from the age of 6 to 12, 6 to 10, sorry, from 10 to 12, they're allowed limited heading, and then I might be getting that wrong. But anyway, you're taking away heading at a crucial period in their lives. Are you doing more damage to them? Because by the time they get to 14 years old, now all of a sudden the ball is being struck at a velocity that can actually cause concussions. Before that time, the kids aren't kicking the ball hard enough. By the time you get to your teenagers, you have kids kicking the ball hard enough to cause a concussion. And if you haven't taught these kids how to head the ball correctly until that point, you might actually lead to more concussions at that time. So it's a very complicated situation. And I think USSF's decision to ban headers for kids at an early stage in premise is a terrific idea, but it may have some unintended consequences as these kids age out and become teenagers and professional athletes.
Nipun Chopra, thank you very much for your time today. Where can the listener find your work and follow you on social media?
Oh, thank you. My Twitter is Nipun Chopra 7. You can find our work at socktakes.com. Thank you guys for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. The door is always open, and thank you very much for your time today. And hopefully it gets a little warmer in Indiana.
Yeah, likewise in Canada.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. And Duane, a lot of interesting talk on USL and ASL, and a lot of great soccer this weekend. Anything you wanted to add about the NASL potential Indy 11 move to USL? I know we have a few acquaintances that do cheer for the Indy 11, and this is directly affecting probably their road trips. They're actually going to have maybe shorter road trips to do some away days.
Look, my last question sort of spoke to it. I'm done with all this politics, and I think most of the fans are too. I don't care what the model is. I don't care about promotion and relegation. I just want people to have a team to cheer for, and I know that there's a lot of good Indy 11 fans out there. So let's hope that there's something that can make sure that team is sustainable moving forward. And if USL is the answer, I don't think there's a big difference between the top teams in USL versus the top teams in NASL. I don't think it's a step down. This message is as much for Ottawa Fury fans that listen to this podcast as it is for Indy 11 fans. There's not that big of a step down. It's okay. We just want stability. We just want teams there. And it'd be ideal.
You mentioned it's not a step down. It might not even be a step at all. It might be like that raft, that life-saving raft that you either play and you hold on to that raft and have a place to play this year, or you wait and maybe drown in the sea of no more NASL, because with the announcement earlier today that the NASL is gearing up to the international calendar, which means they would start in the fall of 2018, their next season. It's kind of looking at this and speculating. It's not just a way to delay the start of the season to make sure you have more than 2 confirmed teams. I think it's a way to extend your purgatory, or to extend the time to find a solution long term, because there's no way this league can start a spring calendar in a few months.
No, it's showmanship purely. The idea of playing a European calendar, a winter schedule in this part of the world, in these winters, if you're north of BC, maybe,
even
really,
Virginia,
it's ridiculous.
Even Virginia is even lower than DC, Dwayne.
It's ridiculous. Like I know there are people listening to this that have this Puritan view of how we should play the game over here. That I shake my head. Like, have you been outside in Toronto in February? Which we're going to be. We're going to play a game. We're going to see how many fans show up for that.
Well,
come on, man. It doesn't make sense.
It's the waste of resources too. Okay, example. Let's imagine a league. Let's just speculate and just do a thought process here. A thought experiment. You have example MLS gearing. Imagine it says, okay, we're going to move to the international calendar. Not saying that it can't be done, but the amount of resources needed as investment to change technology in the pitches all across North America, to put them with heaters underneath the grass to make sure the snow melts. You'll need that in Montreal and Toronto with this, for sure, to even consider playing outside in March, beginning of March and February, on a consistent basis. One-offs are one thing, but to have it weekly, you need that pitch to be heated, and for that to happen, it's a lot of money invested. Put this league-wide, put this places like you need to put a cover on the stadium, like a Montreal, like a Toronto, ideally, to make sure you can actually do those games on a day-to-day basis and practice facilities and all that. You're talking about millions and hundreds of millions of investment and billions league-wide. Yeah, this is not a feasible aspect in the long term at all.
You know what's not feasible as well is a league that's based on TED. Like, it's the TED league at this point. Let's just take every crazy idea out there and just pander to these people that scream on the internet about how we're not like Europe. Like, that's what it comes off to me. And again, what I just said off the top is I don't care about that stuff anymore. I mean, I'll talk about it, obviously, because I have the show, but really, I just want people to have teams to cheer for. And if the Indy 11 move to USL, they're going to be a great team in USL, and they're going to add a lot to that league. And that league is hella more compelling than, a 4-team league that keeps, throwing things at the wall and seeing if they fit, if they stick. I mean, come on, man.
No, exactly. So we'll see what happens. But this does seem like a desperate move by the remnants of the NASL. Let's be clear here. It's what's remaining of the North American Soccer League that today mentioned their intention to move to a winter calendar, and that brings more doubt than answers in my mind. Duane, before we move to the FA Cup, I just want to touch on Montreal for a second and the Zamali situation. We've talked about it a few times last week, but it's looking more and more probable now that the Montreal Impact will swap Zamali back to Bologna, not for a salami, but for a 26-year-old midfielder, Algerian Tider, which played 10 caps this season for Bologna, did play in the World Cup in 2014 for Algeria, French-born player that could, Francophone as well, that could maybe find Montreal a better suitable home for him, and not with the bad connotation that 2017 turned out to have for Blair and Zamali, with the divorce. Asked for a divorce with his wife, and who's going to have the kids, and his want to raise his kids in Europe, which drives his intentions to move back to Europe. So maybe a potential big move for the Impact in the next few days.
Yeah, and look, on the surface, it's not a good look for the Impact to have him want to go back. But obviously, Kevin, you just spoke to the circumstances that are around this. But at the same time, I look at this Bologna thing, and my message from that side is,
remember 2 years ago? Remember what you said and what we said 2 years ago, when you mentioned that the Impact are gearing more and more from being a first team to maybe using Bologna more as a the Impact as not a feeder club, but as a not a resting place either, but as a place and a collaboration a bit more involved, like on both sides with player movement.
I do remember that, and that's sort of what I'm getting to right now, is that if you're an Impact fan and you're passionate about Montreal and you're passionate about the Impact and you've cheered for them forever, I mean, at some point, you have to take a step back, like we did here in this city, say 7 years ago and go, what the hell is going on down there? Because there's a lot of questions that I have about how the Impact are being run right now, and whether Joey is Joey deserves all the credit he does for what he did to keep soccer alive in Montreal, 100%. But the way he's running this team right now, from the outside, I have questions, Kevin, and they're not mine to answer. But if you're an Impact fan listening to this, maybe it's time to start asking them a little more pointedly. That's kind of my point, because it seems like a feeder club thing to me.
Well, yeah, no, it's using Bologna for sure as a benchmark. I would say now, one thing that Joey Saputo mentioned early last year is he did look at his technical staff, and with the recent move in the technical side of the Impact with the clean sweep basically and the hiring of Rémi Garde and whoever is going to be his assistant, we kind of know that there's like Joel Batz, who hasn't been announced, but the guy already has a Twitter, and he says that he's a Montreal Impact goalkeeper coach on the Twitter, so I guess he's the Montreal Impact goalkeeper coach. Amazing man, by the way, looking at his history and his story with Lyon especially. A great story with the supporters and how he made himself to be basically a cult hero and created great goalkeepers, so that could be a good thing. And Joey Saputo invested millions of dollars in this coaching staff, so it might be a tough time right now. If you're looking at the Montreal Impact roster, it's actually pretty thin. When I mean pretty thin, there's not a lot of players. A lot of announcements are left to come, but I would still say
there's no center halves.
Well, pretty much, yeah. The Dure, and hopefully he's not coming back. His value in a salary cap team is way too. Well, he has a terrible value because he costs over north of $300,000, and he didn't bring anything pretty much since he joined the club outside of an own goal. But that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say is, if you're a Montreal Impact supporter, don't panic too quickly. Josef Martinez for Atlanta was announced on February 2nd. And that's just one example. Usually big game changers are announced a little later, and it's day one today. Like, the coaching staff are in town now. They're getting together to plan out the next few weeks and their first training camp and everything like this. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch of players on trials and on scouting trips for the coaches as well, and a lot of videos are going to be watched in the next few days. So I wouldn't be too anxious if I'm a Montreal Impact supporter. In a month's time will be different, but right now we're still at the time where a lot of good players are out there available, and you can still get them until the end of the month. So I'm not kind of worried if I was in Montreal Impact supporters, and I kind of have to give a chance to Rémi Garde just because of his path, his history, and his success that he did have, and especially the time with Lyon, and that could be a good move by the Impact. One of the surprising and low-profile move this offseason by any team, but the fact that Joey Saputo was open and willing to take the checkbook out and use his financial advantage over other clubs in the league, and the fact that there's no salary cap for the amount of money you spend on your coach, which means if you have a lot of money, you can use that advantage to your benefit by using your money to get a better coach than other team can have, and hopefully this is what's happening for Montreal.
So their first impression of Canada and Montreal is going to be the coldest snap that we can remember. Please block the airports.
Tell them it's not always like this. I'm telling you, it's not always like this. Trust me. All right, Duane, before we move to the break and the FA Cup after, we talked about Zemali and how there's a divorce situation and how he wants to raise his kids that are probably important in his decision process wanting to go back to Europe. Let's not forget that with hindsight, when you think about Zemali playing for Montreal, you think of him getting aggravated on the pitch because it's not like he wanted to. His teammates are never where he thinks they should be. The game is not called like he thought it should be. And it was very difficult and not enjoyable. And there's something to say about liking what you do for a living. And if the environment where you do doesn't fit with what you think you should be doing in life, maybe that's as well another reason. And, it's not for everyone. It's not saying that it's good or bad. Let's stop comparing apples and oranges everywhere. Things sometimes are the way they are, and it's not made for everyone. Maybe this type of soccer wasn't made for Zemali.
I know how much Montrealers love to be compared by Torontonians to Toronto, so I'll help you.
They hate it. Every day they tell me, Duane.
Yeah, I know. Jermaine Defoe, Somali. It's your Jermaine Defoe. He just didn't
Yeah.
fit, and he wanted to go home for personal reasons, and you can recover from it, but it's a very similar circumstance. Just the situation behind it's different, but it's a similar circumstance for sure. And he's a talented guy, and it's going to be on the surface difficult to replace him in people's minds, but at the same time, someone who's not happy is not someone that's useful.
And Switzerland is going to the World Cup, which means if you would have Zamali, you would be missing him for like a month and something this summer, almost 2 months. Tider is potential replacement. Algeria did not qualify for the World Cup. So along with American players, Algerians are good to sign this year because, well, they're not going to miss 2 months this summer. So that's another benefit maybe.
Exactly. Just like, if you could pick a completely random player for no particular reason, just like
Bradley?
or Michael.
Let's take a break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Fuck up! The fuck up this weekend. And I have to say, Duane, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Wenger out 4-2 loss to Robin Hood, the Sheriff of Nottingham. Nottingham Forest 4-2 for Arsenal. Wow.
People that know me know that I'm a big Doctor Who fan, so I assumed when I was watching that game that the TARDIS had picked me up and taken me back to 1978, because that would have made sense at that point. Anyway, no, Arsenal. I don't even know where to go with this anymore. Like
Eric Lehigh, an American, scoring twice. I feel bad for the guy because
that's goal. Well, both of them really, but the second one in particular was, oh my God, where does that come from?
Amazing goal. But, I feel kind of bad for the guy because he only scored 1 goal this season before the game. But his wife told him before the beginning of the season a few months ago, be like, Eric, I want your happiness, and I want you to perform well. So if you ever score a hat trick this year, you can get a dog. You can get a best friend. You can get your favorite type of dog if you score 3 goals. Boy, the guy only scored twice. I wish he would have got that third one, and he was trying to get that third one, but he didn't.
Well, it's more important to actually score the penalty than to let a fullback take the penalty. But
and slipped and almost hit it with both his feet.
The instinct for many would be to go, well, as the wife, not. The thing is, this guy's a professional footballer. Getting a dog would mean that the wife is.
The wife takes care of it, yeah.
So I empathize with her. It's a good point. Cat, go with a cat, dude. Cats, they take care of themselves. Dogs, gotta walk them, and it's gonna be all on her. So yeah, be a good man and get a cat.
But I want a dog.
If help a goal, help result, and it was all we love about the FA Cup, right? Like, I mean, sorry, Arsenal fans out there. I know there's a lot of you, but
there's less and less every day, though.
Back. Result.
There's a lot, but there's less and less. Oh, that's a totally something else. So Nottingham Forest, moving on to the 4th round. Another game that caught my attention yesterday was Shrewsbury and West Ham. Joe Hart going back to Shrewsbury, playing for his former team, and the image, in hockey we had that Jose Theodore moment in the early 2000s where he played with like a outdoor game with like a toque because it was so cold. Well, it was very sunny, which is kind of rare for England, but in Shrewsbury it was very sunny on the day, and Joe Hart couldn't see anything, and well, a Shrewsbury fan in the stands just threw him his cap and he's like, well, thanks mate, I'm gonna put this on and hey, I can see now, and actually made terrific save with it. So Joe Hart with a cap is now something.
Former player, as you said, although I think there's another club that he's more associated with, just saying. But anyway, absolutely. Nice. But can I ask a question, though? When you watch those outdoor games, why do goalies put toques on their helmet? Does it actually make them warmer? It doesn't make any sense to me, the toques on the helmet.
Like, it doesn't. It's just, if you put it underneath, it's not comfortable at all. Like, you have that little pom-pom that's kind of like throwing all the weight and how it's distributed. Like, that's not comfortable. It's not snug enough. So, no, it doesn't make any sense to me either. And if you put it on top of the helmet, there's no way that actually keeps the heat in, because there's holes on the helmet that, it doesn't make sense.
And just for an interpretation reason, because most of our Patreon supporters and a lot of our listeners are American, I mean a beanie, I guess.
A toque, whatever. But FA Cup, there was other great results as well. A lot of lower division teams, championship and below, were able to force some replays. If you have a Norwich versus Chelsea, a 0-0. Shrewsbury West Ham finished 0-0 as well. One team that will not need to replay, and that's Manchester City, even though they let the other team get the go-ahead goal, just the opening goal in this game. They came back, and happy birthday, David Silva, today as well.
And happy birthday to him, and prayers if that's what you do, or thoughts if not, for him and his family who are struggling with a premature baby right now. So certainly that is something to think about. But this is how it feels to be City. This is how it feels to be small. This is how it feels to win it all. They win everything, Kevin. They, like, even the FA Cup, when you think any other team that's chasing things. This is the great thing about how much lead they have in the league, is they can focus on the FA Cup. They can focus on the League Cup tie against Bristol City, which is upcoming later this month. How do you see them losing anything? I can see them losing the FA Cup, and I obviously can see them losing the Champions League. But the League Cup and the league, obviously, man, it's hard for me to wrap my head around what the hell is happening in Manchester City right now. They're just winning everything.
Yep. No, it is quite spectacular, the run that they are on right now. They haven't lost in over 30 games now. And that's something.
That is something. Wow. You look at other sports, and that's the point. They're switching. No longer about the sport or the league. It's about sports in general. They're doing something that's unprecedented in sports. 30 games without a loss in all competitions. They had the one loss in the Champions League, but domestically, it's incredible, and it's something to watch. And if you're not a City fan, I'm sorry, but you got to imagine, you got to appreciate that we're watching something that's pretty interesting and pretty special right now. This is in line to make I hate to make this analogy, and I really don't like it at all, but it's in line with what United did in 99.
Oh, that must have hurt. That must have been painful.
Or Arsenal, obviously, with their undefeated season. And that's, those of us that go to the City Supporters Club here in Toronto, we're making jokes about this now, is when do we start talking about this? Because obviously we're talking about it because we're doing it cutely, but at the same time, when do you say it out loud? When does being undefeated for the entire season become your goal rather than win a title? Because I think they've won the title. That makes me uncomfortable to say that, but it's hard to articulate the math that they're not going to at this point. So what's the goal? Is it to win the Champions League? Is it to go undefeated? Which is more impressive? Would winning the Champions League be more impressive than going undefeated? I'm not sure.
How about both?
Either or both are absurd.
How about both? Which is not out of the realm of possibility. Speaking of not out of the realm of possibility, with the exit of Arsenal in the FA Cup yesterday against Nottingham Forest, this might be the end of a streak in Europe for Arsenal. If they don't win Europa League, which might be their only way into the Champions League, if they get booted out of Europa League, they might not even qualify for the Europa League for next year, because they might not win a trophy at all, might not even be close enough, and they might be further in the table that they won't even qualify for Euro League. So it's either Europa League win or bust in Europe for Arsenal.
Well, they could still win the League Cup as well, which has a Europa League spot. But, for sure. I don't think Burnley is going to hold on to their position. Let's be blunt here. But then again, I didn't think Leicester was going to hold on to their position 2 years ago either. So.
You can do it, Tarfeld. I believe in you.
Well, like I said, I almost feel sorry for them right now. And that's weird because it's their Arsenal. They win everything. I mean, they don't win everything. They win a lot. So they're a pretty big club. I don't know what the answer there is. And if Wenger left, would that be the answer? Maybe, I guess. I think that if you're Wenger, you have to really have some self-reflection right now. And the signs and the whole Wenger out thing, it's hilarious. It's a meme at this point. Yeah. But maybe it's time to just step aside. I don't think he's going to, though. Like, this is a guy that is not self-aware enough for some reason to actually walk out on top. He's going to need that like catastrophe. He's going to need to lose a European spot to Burnley to understand that it's time to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you look at Sanchez. The rumors of his move back to City are back on the table.
And Ozil,
$47 million.
And the sell of Ozil, which is possible as well. So you're looking at a manager stripping the club of its best assets and maybe just leaving. And then you leave the club in shambles, and everything that you worked for in the last 20 years are not even present when you leave. What's the point? Is that what you call a legacy? Stripping the club and leaving the club in a worse place than when you got there? Or just at the exact same spot? It kind of doesn't make sense either. I don't understand the stubbornness of the players versus Arsene, and Arsene versus not getting rid of the right players at the right time or not signing potential replacement. It's very weird what's going on with Arsenal.
Yeah, it's very weird is the way to put that, for sure. As I've said many, many times before, this is a club that if it ever channeled all of its resources positively, to me, could be among the top clubs in the world. It's in London. There's a massive worldwide fan base. They have money. They have talent. They have everything
nice
going
stadium,
for them. But they just
like a brand new state-of-the-art big stadium. So yeah, you're right.
It's absurd that they don't win championships. I mean, and a lot of us, I think, remember, well, many of us that listen to this podcast do remember when they were capital A Arsenal back in the early part of the turn of the century.
Yeah,
like they're really so far removed from that now.
He never replaced Thierry Henry, both on the pitch and in the locker room, in the way that he was influential in the result of the team. And yeah, it's kind of where Arsenal are right now. All right, that's enough soccer talk for today, Duane. We'll be back tomorrow with more soccer talk, more news, more of your favorite soccer show. So, as always, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. And have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.